What we'll be talking about with you today is how to bring spirit into home, work, and play. And this is a particularly good topic now in the middle of July when people are taking vacations, and how to approach all of our life in the most uplifted way. We hope that, by the way, we hope that you're being able to keep cool in this very hot summer. As we were just coming into our video studio, we have a lot of wild turkeys that live on the property here at Ananda Village.
At least they used to be wild, but getting less so.
And we have trees that we've planted around this building, and with the little drip systems around them. And there were like the turkeys are about this big. There are 3 big turkeys seated under each tree, getting into the cool, damp earth. So we hope you're finding a way to stay cool and damp. But more important than that, we want to share with you some thoughts about in the midst of play, family life, work responsibilities, how to always do it in the most uplifted way. So first Jyotish will speak a bit, then I'll speak a bit, and then we'll open up and invite you to ask us some questions.
Well, let me start with a little bit of a broader view. This subject of bringing spirit into work and play and home is a very important one, but it goes deeper than just the surface of the subject. Really what it implies is that when there was the changeover of ages from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, there was also a changeover in really the way to see God and the way to worship God. In Kali Yuga, because the age of mankind, generally speaking, was so dark, they thought of God as being distant, and that the way to worship him was to leave society. And so God was thought of as a king. That's why we have so much of the literature and scriptures referring to, "Oh my Lord," and "I bow before thee," in kind of royal terms. You can bow in humility, but you also bow before royalty. And so there's that sense of God being the king and being distant, being unapproachable by people. And even the medieval churches are heavy because the buildings were made from stone, and they have a spire usually, and that's to bring the consciousness up toward a point as if inspired or aspiring, all words with that upward moving energy. But specifically the religion, the serious people about finding God, felt that they needed to leave society and go and join a monastery, or in India, go up into the Himalayas, go into an ashram that was away from society, because society as a culture did not support their spiritual aspirations. But then when the changeover came from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, there came with it a difference in how to approach God. And specifically, our line of gurus helped to drive home the point that we should try to see God in everything, so that we shouldn't leave the family, leave the home, go away, live in the Himalayas in order to find God, but we should see him. And that was very pertinently expressed in the meeting between Lahiri Mahashaya and Babaji. Those of you who've read the autobiography will know the story, and those who haven't have the great privilege of reading that book and hearing the story. But Babaji called Lahiri to him. At the time, Lahiri was in his early 30s, and he already had a family, he had a job, and so Babaji called him to him, reawakened in him the knowledge of his unity with God. He went into samadhi for many days straight, and at the end of that period, he begged Babaji to let him stay there with him in the Himalayas, removed from mankind, in other words, removed from the hustle and bustle of daily life. But Babaji said to him, there was a reason that I did not call you to me until you had mild responsibilities in the world. You had a job and you had a family and you had children. And your now job is to go back to that life and show that God can be found in daily life. Well, it's a very beautiful personal story, but it also is much deeper than that, because it's a change of how we approach God. And so now, in our lifetime and in our work specifically, our task is not to retreat from the world, but rather to do what others need to do. We need to have jobs. We need to have homes and families and children. And we need to carry on all of the aspects of life. And if we don't do that, we're not going to be very good models for other people who are seeking a higher way of life. And so this bringing of spirit into what we do is not just a kind of a casual topic that is nice to address. It really lies at the core of our work and of Ananda's work. Ananda specifically has the mission of showing how you can live in this world in community. And here I've been talking about you don't leave the world and go into the ashram. Well, you don't here at Ananda either. We work very hard. We have responsibilities. We have financial responsibilities. We have homes. We have children. We have schools. We have businesses. We have everything else. The reason that we gather together in a community is that it's still, in this age, easier to fulfill your spiritual aspirations when you have the support of others around you who are doing the same thing, and so you can be mutually supportive. But most of our communities are not rural. They're right in the middle of big cities. We just came from our Seattle community, which is in right in the midst of the greater Seattle area of commerce and that urban area. And so most of our communities are planted in big cities so that people can live in community, live in a way that their spiritual life is supported, group meditations, classes, Sunday services, all of that, but that they can carry on their occupations, continue to have home and family and play together. So it all works together. But here the point is that the world is not something that just is kind of a detriment or an annoyance to your spiritual life. The world is the canvas on which you must paint the art form of your spiritual life. Okay, so having set that stage, let's talk a little bit about how do we bring spirit into everyday life. Well, if we were able to maintain a high enough consciousness, what we would try to do is we would try to feel our unity with God in meditation, and then during the outer activity, we would see that everyone is just an aspect of God. Everyone is Divine Mother in the role of that person, playing that person's part, but it's Divine Mother who is playing all of the roles. There's a beautiful story of a young disciple of Satya Sai Baba. This boy was, 7 or 8 at the time. And he had been in the ashram with Satya Sai Baba and others for quite some time. And now a weekend came in which he went back to visit his family. And when he came back, Satya Sai Baba said, "Did you have a nice time seeing your parents?" And the young boy said, "Oh, Baba, all I saw was you." And Baba said, "Well, didn't you meet your siblings, your brothers and sisters?" He said, "No, Baba, all I met was you." And then Satya Sai Baba said one more time, "But didn't you play with any of your friends?" And the little boy said, "Don't tease me anymore, Baba. All I saw was you." Well, if we can maintain that high level of consciousness, indeed, all we see is God in whatever form. But frankly, it's not easy to hold on to that level of consciousness and see that it's actually God who cuts you off in the fast lane and forces you to slow down. It's not easy to see that it's only God that is yelling at you at work or whatever the problems, the daily problems might be. If we can hold that level of consciousness, then we can do it. But what I'm saying is it's hard to hold that level. So we should aspire and do our best to hold that level. The way to do difficult tasks is to do the easy part of the task first, kind of as practice. So when you're with compatible people, when you're with uplifted people, make an extra effort to see God in that form. And if you can practice that, and then also try to see God in the form of those people who are very close and repetitively close to you in this life. So see God as your family, see God as your spouse, see God as your children, see God as your parents, see God at work in those people that you work with closely. And so don't necessarily try to see everybody in the whole world as God until you can work your way up to that. So it's all directional, in other words. Our task in this world as yogis is to move our energy directionally. That's why the very spiritual techniques that we have are about energy control. And the energy control teaches us how to not only become aware of, but then able to bring the direction of prana, the direction of energy under our conscious control. And when we do that, the result is that we also bring our feelings and our reactions and our consciousness under our conscious control. And as we do that more and more, then we can express that controlled consciousness, that already uplifted consciousness, into more and more situations. And at that time, then we become a source of great encouragement, of comfort, of nurturing to other people around us, because they will, in a sense, feed off of our higher consciousness, because every soul is aspiring to those higher levels of consciousness. So here I'm talking about it a little generally, but let's talk more specifically first about work. How do we bring higher consciousness into work? Well, first of all, try to be positive throughout the day. So avoid the negativity monster that says, "Oh, I don't like this kind of work. I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk to that person." When you find your mind negating the very situation that you're in, that's a very good sign that you need to turn that around. So find a way to find a positive relationship to the things around you. When we were in India last year, we showed the Finding Happiness movie at a business college. And it's actually a beautiful college. It's a spiritual business college. But the director of that college told us that he has an exercise that they do with the students. They have 200 or 300 students in the college. And he said that on occasion they come into a big assembly hall and they have one person go up, and then they have student after student after student go up on stage with that one person and say 3 things about them that they appreciate. And so at the end of a half hour, that person has been told by dozens of students how they appreciate him. And of course, the whole audience is resonating behind that. And so it's a very helpful thing for the self-esteem of that student, but it gets all of the students, the whole school, moving in a positive direction of appreciation and positive thinking. So if you're having difficulty in your job, take the aspect or the person that you're having difficulty with and think of 3 good things about them, 3 things that you appreciate. And then keep doing that until you can get into the flow of energy, into a habit by which when you see something that used to be negative now becomes positive. When we started the ashram in San Francisco, we also started a bookstore and restaurant. And the manager of that bookstore restaurant combination had to close up at night. And so she didn't get done working till 11 or 11:30 every evening. She didn't drive, so she had to take a bus from that location across town to where we had our big house ashram that we all lived together in. And that bus came through some of the worst parts of town. So she just really hated that bus ride. She was afraid, she was anxious, people would get on, they were inebriated, they were drugged out, they went through the difficult parts of town, she was afraid of violence. And so she went to Swamiji with this problem. And Swamiji said, first worked at the problem logically. He said, well, can you drive? She said, no, I don't know how to drive. He said, well, is there somebody that can pick you up? She said, not consistently. It's late and people are usually in bed. I don't think I can call on people like that. He said, well, if you can't avoid that ride, then do this. When you get on the bus, pick one person, the person that you feel intuitively is most in need of your prayers. And then when you're on the bus, send constant prayers to that person. And if they get off the bus before you do, then pick the next most needy person and send prayers to them. And so she began this practice. And after 2 weeks or so, she came to Swamiji and she said, Swamiji, the bus ride has become my favorite part of the day. And so we can, with enough energy and with the right practice, we can take a negative situation and turn it into not only a neutral, but an extremely positive situation. So look for ways to take the negativity out of your work environment and show appreciation, show harmony, show caring and kindness to the people around you, and they will begin to respond to you in a like manner. In the home, try to create what we would call a sattvic environment in the home. So sattvic environment would mean that it's clean, it's simple, the colors are uplifting, the entertainment is uplifting, and so that everything helps the energy to rise. When we first started here, we had a wonderful Swami visiting, and he was going around, this was in the early 1970s, going around the community, and someone was showing him the garden, and they showed him through a lot of things, and at one point there was a little rusty can, and he asked, what is that used for? And they said, well, we use this when we transplant one of the little plants, we get water and we use that to water it. He said, if it's used as a tool, then clean it up and paint it. He said, because old, disused, rusty things that are in bad shape, he said they draw lower astral entities. And so think of your home as drawing angels, the things in your home. Either those things are drawing angels or they're drawing lower astral entities. And take a look around your home and get rid of those things that draw lower astral entities and replace them with the things that draw angelic, draw the devas. And you can do this more and more consciously, and it will actually change the vibration of your home. And the same things apply in home as they do at work. Appreciate, work positively, give energy, and it will change the environment of your home. And finally, in play, look for not just passive entertainment, but active things that you can do that allow the creative force to flow through you. And you can do that with your children. It's fun to have games that you can play, places that you can go. Go and do things that are not only fun but uplifting. And if you do that, you will find you don't need to look for spirit in work, play, and home, but you will recognize that that spirit has been there all along. You just needed to raise your consciousness so that you could see that everything is indeed just Divine Mother playing the roles of this world.
Hello. Before I begin sharing on this theme, I just want to say personally what a great blessing it's been in my life, more than I can ever express. I'm getting to teach in partnership with Jyotish. It just always to be bathed in the clear voice of spirit, of Master's teachings, and it's just been a great joy to be able to teach with him and to listen to his wisdom and his spiritual insight. Now, excuse me, on this subject, how to bring spirit, continuing from what Jyotish is saying, how to bring spirit into home, work, and play. First of all, to bring spirit into these different aspects of our life, we have to be in touch with spirit. And how do we do that? Well, there's the beautiful passage that when Christ is asked, how can we find God? He said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength." And this gives us, really it's outlining the paths of yoga, and it's outlining the process of having every aspect of our life be absorbed in God. So, first of all, love the Lord with all thy heart. When we meditate, when we have our inner life, without devotion, without opening up our heart to God, we never can really advance. Sri Yukteswar said in his very learned book, very not easy to understand, The Holy Science, at the very end he says, "And so I think I have conclusively proved that without love of the heart, one cannot take the first step on the spiritual path." And so to live with spirit, we have to love spirit. We have to love the higher consciousness and express it. And when we in service in many, many ways. So loving the Lord with all thy heart, loving the Lord with all thy mind. Try to be remembering God all the time, to be reaching out to him, to be having an inward dialogue all the time with God. How are you today? Are you enjoying this beautiful day? Today it's hotter, today it's colder, sunny, cloudy, whatever it may be. But to keep your mind ever turning towards God. And then with all your soul, that's the process of meditation, where we try to absorb God, try to commune with Spirit, try to feel that we're offering ourselves completely into that higher consciousness. And then finally, with all thy strength, that means with all thy life force, with all thy prana. So again, it's encompassing all of them. It's in all that we do, feeling there's an upward flow of energy. And this, for those of you who practice meditation, we're taught to concentrate at the spiritual eye. And for those of you who practice Kriya Yoga, we're taught to raise consciously and with willpower, raise the energy up the spine, the Kundalini up through the different chakras, and let it be totally merged there at the spiritual eye, the individual consciousness with the creative universal force. And so these are ways that through our meditation, we become more and more aware of, through devotion, through concentration, through interiorization, and through absorption, we become more and more aware of spirit in our life. And then when we go about our daily life, we try to hold in your mind mindfulness of this rising flow of energy. Because if we, in everything that we do, if we never waver from that rising flow of energy, then everything we do can be just the same as our meditation. Swami Kriyananda was such a wonderful, wonderful example and role model for bringing spirit into everything we do. I know he first let's start with play. You know, he had a demanding life of service and traveling and lecturing and writing, but he also balanced that with regular play, with community members, with people he was visiting. And he did it in such a way that it was always in an upward flow. That's why he would often read the P.G. Wodehouse stories so that we could come together. P.G. Wodehouse is a British humorist that Swami enjoyed. First found out about him when he was a schoolboy in England and would read us stories on many occasions. But it was a way to be together in a satsang, but also in a relaxed social setting. And he would read these stories and we would laugh and laugh. And you know, it's also interesting. Swami felt that he was in a past life in which Master tells us that he was William the Conqueror, Yoganandaji was William the Conqueror. Swami felt that he was William's son, Henry I. And when you read about Henry I, his life historically, he said he would do his royal functions in the morning, and then in the afternoon he would gather around him all the young men on the court, and they would go horseback riding or do wrestling or whatever it was. But he wanted to bring joy into the court then, and he certainly brought joy into all of the activities of Ananda. And so in our play, if we need to laugh, Master said it's important to laugh, important to smile for our spiritual life, but always to do it, not humor without sarcasm, humor with kindness, fun and robust activity, but never so that it becomes too rajasic or maybe borderlines on being aggressive or too combative, but to do things in a spirit of fun and joy and uplifting energy, the same kind of energy that we feel in meditation. And then in our home environment, again, Swami always created a beautiful ambiance in his own home, and he was so gracious, and we all learned from him. Recently we had some people over for lunch, and I simply did place settings with plates and napkins and the silverware and glasses. And the woman, there were 4 people coming over, and one of them had been raised in a wealthy home. And she walked in and she just stopped and she said, hardly anyone takes the trouble to set a table anymore. It's either a buffet or whatever, but she said how nice it is to sit down and have that refinement there. And so in your home environment, to have a sense of graciousness, again, it's that uplifting energy of spirit. And sometimes with family, it's easy to get maybe a little over familiar, where you're kind of treating people maybe a little callously, a little insultingly, and maybe that's supposed to be funny. But we should treat the people around us with more respect and more acknowledgement and appreciation than we do others, because it creates an environment of uplifted energy. I remember, this is a personal story, one of the first times Swamiji, we invited him over to our house for dinner. And we had been married just a few months, and over the years I've learned more about cooking, and I'm a pretty good cook and very much enjoy doing it. But in the beginning I was very nervous, and here Swami was coming over to our house for dinner, and so he knocked, and there were several people coming with him. He knocked on the door, and we said, "Come in." But I was still in the kitchen cooking, and I didn't come out to greet him. And Swami came right into the kitchen, and I was still fixing at the stove, and he turned me around and he said, "Hello, good evening, nice to see you." And I was surprised, but I realized he was training me. "No, you're the hostess here. You should greet your guests. The food will be okay. Turn off the burner if you need to, but greet your guests and be gracious and be welcoming." And so I can't tell you how much that improves family life. Jyotish and I know we have a grown son, so it's just the two of us at home, although we travel a great deal and are very often staying in other people's homes. But we try to, even when it's just the two of us, to sit down, have a nice meal, have a nice conversation, not just lost in a book or an iPad, but just those little gracious parts of life. And Swamiji said Master was very much that way too. When he would host people, it was done with, he was the most gracious host in the world. So try to remember that, to make your home environment be refined. Don't take things for granted. Don't think, sure, sometimes you need just to collapse and so forth, but still you don't have to do it in such a way where the energy falls. And then again, when we play, coming back to that topic, to do it in such a way that there's a rising kind of energy. I know Swami would often watch movies with people. He'd invite them over to his house. But the movies he watched, he was very selective about them. And they weren't movies that had a downward energy, that were overly violent or sexual or had bad language or just had a downward pulling energy. He liked movies that were thought-provoking and uplifted the consciousness and were visually beautiful. So again, when in the choices of our play, even if it's whatever it may be, going for a hike, do it with that upward flow of energy. And I guess this is the important point I'm trying to make. It's a common tendency when you think, oh, I've got time off. That means the energy drops. Well, there's a difference between relaxation and letting the energy fall to lower levels or to lower chakras. We can relax, but at the same time in an upward flow of energy. That's very important to remember, and it really can make a difference in your life. And then finally, to how do we bring spirit into our work? Well, Jyotish spoke of it so beautifully. But here again, Swami was a wonderful example. He worked very, very hard, but when we're working with an upward flow of energy, there's not a sense of tension, and that's the difference. So whatever responsibilities you may be doing try to feel God's just flowing through me. God is making this report or cleaning this house or whatever it might be. And if we can do that, then we don't get so tired. I remember once some years ago, and I may have shared this story with you, but Swami was moving into the dome at the Crystal Hermitage. And he asked some of us to come over, and the interior needed to be painted before he was able to move in. And so he asked a number of us to go over, and we worked in the morning, and I was painting some of the trim work on the inside of the house. And then we took a break. Swami said, okay, let's take a break at lunch and come back at 2. And we came back, and then we just kept working and working, and finally Swami, and we finished. And then at that point Swami said, well, that was a good day's work. And we all felt happy and refreshed, and we looked at our watches, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And we had just worked all afternoon, didn't stop even for dinner. But there was such a flow of spirit, such a flow of joyful energy that nobody was tired. Once someone asked India's great saint, Mahatma Gandhi, who just was constantly working throughout his life, they said, don't you ever take a vacation? And Gandhi answered, I'm always on vacation. And that's when we're living in spirit. It always feels like we're on vacation, whether we're playing, whether we're at home, whether we're at work. But the secret is to have that rising flow of energy. And if we can do that, then all of life becomes a great joy. And everything that we do is with the inward awareness that God is with us. So now we'd like to respond to some of your questions. Sambhava we have in our studio with us Melody and Sambhava, and Sambhava will be reading your questions to us.
The first question is, I've heard of the game of minutes. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, I'll mention that. It's a very, very interesting idea. It came out of the work of, what's his name?
Frank Laubach.
Yes, Frank Laubach. He was a missionary to, I believe it was the Philippines, and found that what he wanted to do was, he was having a hard time having very much success in spreading the church, spreading the Christian religion there. The natives, by and large, were not too very interested in theology. They were trying to survive. So early in his practice, he started more and more to practice the presence of God. And he tried to feel God as often as he could, feel him in every circumstances, working through his hands, thinking of him as he wrote at his typewriter, thinking of him as he worked with other people. And eventually he developed a couple of things. One, he developed a program called Each One, Teach One. And that spread literacy. As soon as someone had a little bit of literacy, they were able to recognize the alphabet, they would teach somebody else how to read the letters of the alphabet. And so everybody was not only learning but teaching others. But the game of minutes was a kind of an advanced working on how to practice the presence of God. And so the game of minutes is to try to think of God at least once, even if it's very briefly, but at least once every minute. And then you see how many minutes in a row you can go where you've thought of God each minute. And he used to, when he would give, for instance, a church service or a sermon, he would challenge the congregation at the beginning to try to think of God every minute while they were sitting in church, of all the optimal times that should be it. And then he would give that instruction, and then at the end of the talk and the sermon and whatever it was, he would ask for a show of hands. How many of you were able to think of God every minute, at least one time, while we were here? And very few hands would go up. And he would then ask, how many were able to think of God most of the minutes? And a few more hands. At least half of the minutes, a few more hands, and so on. So this game of minutes is a way of keeping God present in your life. We happen to have a member of Ananda who lives here, whose parents were also missionaries, and they met Frank Laubach and had dinner with him. And in this gathering, someone asked Frank to say grace before the meal. And Catherine, the person here, her parents said it was the most remarkable thing. They said it was unlike any prayer they had ever heard. It was much more as if they had just stepped into the room and Frank was repeating out loud the conversation he was constantly having with Jesus or constantly having with God. And so the game of minutes is a way to increase the awareness of God's presence in our life.
The next question is, how can you see God in an evil person like Hitler?
Okay. Well, this world is a combination. The world of the senses that we perceive is a combination of light and dark, good and evil. So it's not that we say, oh, everything is good, but in this world of duality, one has to expect that there will be forces of moderate good, moderate evil, intense good, the great saints, intense evil, the great villains of history. So this is a reality, but I think the differentiation is we don't need to judge that person as evil. We can historically read, in fact, I'm reading a book about the rise of Nazism in Germany in the early 30s. It's really an amazing story. But you can also see the political and historical currents coming out of the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles, that led to the opening in the German population to allow someone like Hitler to take over. So it's all part of a great drama. It's all part of God's play. And if we can see it from that point of view too, certain ones have to be the villains, certain ones are the heroes. But at the end of all this great drama, all souls eventually, even the worst of evil people, eventually all souls will merge into God. And we just have to, when I see someone who's made a mistake and maybe hurt other people in a little way, I think, well, they just don't know any better yet. If they knew better, they would do better. But then there are souls like Hitler who are instruments for darker forces, for evil into this world. But it's not, but if we hold hatred and judgment and vengeance towards them, we just perpetuate that dark force in the world. We can recognize it for what it is, but then we don't have to dwell on it. We can learn from it. And I'm sure there are many souls in Germany who learned the hard way the evil that was perpetrated by that government, even though they didn't see it coming at the time. And so we are all in a school. We are all learning lessons of life. And the important thing is, even in the West, Judas, who betrayed Christ, I mean, he immediately suffered for it. But one has to, for me, I just have great compassion for him, because he, on most of his being, knew that he was doing a terrible mistake. But there was that temptation that pulled him in that to be a force of evil, but it was all a part of God's drama. All the characters were playing their part in God's drama. So essentially, we can't be so airy-fairy that we don't recognize and accept that there is great evil, that there have been great villains of history, but just don't judge them, see it as all part of God's drama, and try to help others to learn from their own mistakes.
I would just add that when you look at someone historically like Hitler who did great wrong, or if you look at someone in your own life who's doing something that's harmful to other people, rather than feel judgmental or angry toward them, feel compassionate and try to send them prayers, because it's as if there is some veil, some miasma that comes over the mind that allows them to kind of reposition what they're doing as being of benefit. Hitler didn't necessarily do something only to do bad. He thought he was doing something that was going to be beneficial, creating a master race. I mean, we can look in retrospect and we can say how absurd, but we have people in our lives every day who are doing things that kill other people, and they justify it. People who are in the cigarette industry, they are, through their activities, the result is millions of lives are unnecessarily lost every year. And yet they justify it. It isn't, oh, I'm trying to kill millions of people. No, it's, oh, we need the industry. We need the income. And so there's some justification. So try to be compassionate and pray that the miasma of justification wash away from those people so that they can really see that what they're doing is wrong.
So the next question is, how can I best work with people in the business world who are not honest and truthful with the quality of their work? And my team's work is depending on the quality of these people's work.
Well, I'll start with the story. There's a very wonderful soul named Dr. Suzuki, who started the whole Suzuki method of musical education for children, teaching them from a very young age how to play the violin, and I believe it's spread to other instruments as well. And in his book telling about this method, he tells a story. He and his family survived the Second World War. They're of Japanese heritage, and they were living in Japan after the war. He was from a very refined family, and somehow they were living in an area that was not, they survived. But there were many little street orphans, living on the streets who had lost their parents, had no homes. And so even though their home was very, very refined, very cultured, very gracious, they took in a little street orphan who had just grown up without a family. And this child had no manners, he had no sense of decorum and so forth. And his wife came to Dr. Suzuki and really complained, how can you expect me to have this child living with us? He's like a little wild animal. He doesn't have any manners or cleanly habits or anything. And Dr. Suzuki said, you are right, my dear. We must be more vigilant in our expression of good manners and graciousness. And little by little, they were able to train this adopted child and integrate him into their family. So if you have people that aren't performing at the level that you know they could or that they need to, try to be even more vigilant in your own work habits. You can't motivate people by, for a little while you can, but on the long term it's not effective, by criticism and judgment and harder driving them. But if you can create an environment, work with, start yourself creating a positive work ethic, showing that I'm doing the very best I can, and then identify other people on your team that are positive, that are in harmony with you, and begin working more consciously with those people. Essentially, the point I'm making, it's a matter of magnetism. So if you start with your own self and your behavior, and then magnetize a few others that are more positive than not, and then the other people will start seeing and they'll start getting on board. And great things can be accomplished this way. But if the environment becomes one of, well, you're not carrying your part and I'm doing more than you and you didn't follow through on that project, that does not create positive magnetism. So the question you need to ask yourself is, how can I create the optimal magnetic environment that brings the best out of everyone, that makes everyone feel they want to do their best? And maybe you set up little rewards along the way. If our team is able to produce this, then we'll take 2 days off or whatever it may be. But set up a little reward system along the way, make it fun, and look for people, if you have the ability, to bring on your team that have that sense of enthusiasm in and enjoyment of doing the very best that they can. So these are some ideas.
I would also say that any person in a position of management occasionally has to talk to somebody about the quality of their work, or even to confront somebody about something that they're doing wrong. A couple of things. One, always get yourself centered so that you're not coming from a reactive state when you make a suggestion or a criticism. And secondly, try to put your criticism in such a way that the person can feel that you're actually trying to help them do a better job or help them overcome a habit that's holding them back. If you're needing to correct somebody about honesty and you need to confront them, you might put it in such a way, I have seen that you're being dishonest in your work, and unless you're able to change that habit that is going to hold you back from advancement far into the future. And so depersonalize it a little, put it in the way that the person understands that your corrective is trying to help them and is of benefit to them. But if people feel that you're trying sincerely to help them, they'll be much more open to hearing suggestions.
So how does one keep the energy up throughout each day with a continuing increase of responsibilities?
Well, I just have to harken back to the techniques and teachings of our path. First of all, start every day with the practice. If you know the energization exercises, if you don't, take some of our courses either online or in one of our centers, learn the energization exercises. You can do a few yoga postures. Master wrote Swamiji a letter. He said, keep exercising, keep the body fit for self-realization. So don't ignore the physical body. Make sure you're eating properly. Make sure you're, as Master instructed, make sure you have regular exercise as Master instructed. And then start with the energization exercises every day. And then do meditation every day. If you don't know how, again, take an online course, take a course in person. But in my own life, I think I have more responsibility and activity now than I ever did. And because of that, I just realize I don't have the luxury not to do the energization, not to slack off on my meditation. And so really, no matter how much responsibility you have, put the energy out to keep your spiritual life strong. Master's most advanced disciple, who he gave the name Rajasi Janakananda, was a self-made millionaire, and he was on the board of directors of many large international corporations. But he would come into the office every day at, I believe it was 11 o'clock, if not late into the morning. But he wouldn't be just lolling around the house. He would have a long period of meditation every morning. And one of his co-workers asked him, how can you afford to come into work so late every day? And he said, it's because I come into work every day so late that I'm able to be effective. And they would say he would be at a board meeting and they would be giving a report and pages of financial data. And he would just say, 10 minutes ago you quoted this figure, now you've quoted it as a different number. And the man would say, oh yes, that's a mistake. But because his mind was so concentrated from deep meditation, he was able to just flow with all those responsibilities. So practice the techniques and teachings. And Swami also repeatedly said to us, see God as the doer in all things. So no matter what you have to do, don't think, oh, I've got so much on my shoulders. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Just say, God's doing this through me. And he's going to have a good time. I know very often when I have to give a class, I will give it I do prepare. I'm not someone who can just get up there and kind of talk off the top of my head. I'll give it thought, I'll give it preparation, but then I always, always pray, Lord, these are ideas that have come to me, but you flow through me. Let your energy be coming through me, because without that, nothing has value. So no matter how much responsibility you have, don't feel that you are doing it, but God's energy, try to feel that God's energy is flowing through you.
I'll just add a couple of points that come from practical experience. As Devi was implying, our life has gotten extremely busy with lots and lots of responsibility. So what we talk about from personal experience, not just kind of book knowledge. One thing to do is look at the points of your own resistance. A lot of the reason that we feel burdened or tired is because we're like those wires in a toaster where you try to send energy through it, and all it does is heat up. The energy doesn't move through because there's so much resistance in the wire. Well, it's good for toasting bread, but not very good if you're not trying to toast yourself. So try to get rid of your resistances. Secondly, I would say build in little breaks, little mental breaks and little vibrational breaks. Maybe build into your life, if you can, a little bit of a walk every day in nature. Instead of at lunchtime, go out and walk around for 10 minutes. Get out of that work environment, get into a new environment. And then finally, I would say also try to find ways that you can relax but not be tamasic or just drop the energy. Maybe pick up a hobby that's of interest to you and that you enjoy doing, and do a little bit of that each day, and it'll help kind of let one part of your brain rest, and it will light up another part of your brain, and the two then will work more harmoniously together.
Okay, this is the last question. What is your favorite movie?
Oh, I can't say I have one favorite movie. It depends on what you're wanting. I love movies. Swami loved movies. His favorite movie was Bambi, and I have to say that's one of my favorite movies as well. I also, I think the movie Gandhi is one of the greatest movies ever made. I'm also a big fan. I've been a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, and I think they did a very good job with bringing that to the screen. Not so much The Hobbit, but The Lord of the Rings. And then finally, there's a beautiful little movie that we kind of rediscovered. It came out about 10 years ago, no, about 25 years ago, excuse me, and we haven't watched it since then, but it's called The Black Stallion. And it's apparently Roger Ebert, one of the great film critics, said it was in his top 5 favorite films. Beautifully photographed, very simple story, but it has a very expansive, uplifting vibration. So those are all different ones, but it depends really what you're in the mood for. I don't think I can say I have one favorite movie.
Yeah, favorite movie is a hard one to say. There are movies that I think are extremely good and extremely important, but I've watched them once and haven't wanted to watch them again. Schindler's List is one of those movies. I think it's one of the very most important movies made, and yet it's a hard movie to watch. And Steven Spielberg has made a number of very, very fine movies. Other movies, sometimes we watch movies just for relaxation or humor. If you're watching a humorous movie, try to find ones that are kind of light and fun and not downward pulling. But just, I don't know, enjoy. Don't feel guilty about it. Enjoy it. But if you're going to pick out a movie that you can say, Master, sit down and let's watch this movie together. Okay, I think that's the time we have for tonight, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jyotish and Devi. I just want to invite everyone to the next webinar, August 6th, with Jyotish and Devi, How to Get Out of Your Spiritual Comfort Zone.
Okay,
So we'll see you then.
God bless you all.
God bless you.